Welcome, Chris Smith. It's official. We're live across the world. What's up, buddy?
I'm stoked to be here. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, hey, because we're live and because attention spans are short these days, before we even get into who you are, why people should stick around and listen, what's one thing financial advisors should be thinking about right now if you're going to give them some advice?
Yeah, the one thing I would be thinking about right now is that the most powerful thing you have right now to differentiate yourself, which differentiation is now more important than ever has been, is your story and your message. It's not how you manage money. It's not how you allocate assets. It's not how you do planning, right? Like the most powerful thing you have to connect with people at a really deep level and reassure them in a time of uncertainty is the story and the message you're putting out. And it's never been more important also that you're connecting with your clients on their story. So it's both. It's sharing your story, but it's also like it's never been more important than ever in the history of your practice as an advisor that you are connecting with your clients at a deep level and really understanding their story.
Cool. Well, I'm excited, buddy, because story, that you're a master at it. And so for those tuning in, whether you're watching on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever we're streaming worldwide, YouTube, I think. So Chris has become a friend. For those of you that didn't catch my first podcast with him on the Elite Advisor Blueprint, crushed it. Still one of my top downloaded episodes of all time. He shared kind of a framework that you've developed over years, Chris, the Campfire Effect, your origin story on your practice, how that translates to your proprietary process, all of that. I'm sure we'll dive into that today. But I'm just excited to have you back. And I can promise you, if you're a financial advisor out there right now, stick around. You're going to get all kinds of wisdom over the next 45, 50 minutes. So with that, if you're not already in the Virtual Advisor Facebook group, one of the reasons that it exists today is this guy that I've got on here with me. Chris is in a lot of high-level mastermind groups in financial services. And he's like, why don't you share? I'm not going to say, you hit me up and you're like, hey, Brad, we should do something because there's a conversation going around. People need help. Oh, you're muted, buddy.
Sorry.
There we go.
I am, by the way, I'm working from home today. Like that's the biggest misnomer in the world today. You don't have to say that, right? So with the kids screaming in the background. So I'm lying awake in bed like 5 weeks ago. I think it was 5 weeks ago. No concept of time, like all of us, right? I'm lying awake in bed sometime in this, and I'm thinking like, what can I do to make a difference for advisors? What can I do to make a difference for our clients? And all of a sudden this training just comes to me. And I develop trainings and frameworks and formulas for a living. So I do a lot of trainings. It was the fastest I'd ever had like a training downloaded to me on the title, exactly what it was. And it was how to share your message in times of uncertainty and why your message matters more in times of uncertainty than it's ever mattered. And then I'm sitting back. I had this revelation, Brad, I would call it, that I'm sitting back and I'm watching advisors and just entrepreneurs and companies in general. And I'm watching the stories they're putting out or the stories they're not putting out. And granted, I'm granting everyone, including myself, a lot of grace because we've never dealt with something like this before. And at the same time, I'm still shocked that like, I couldn't believe the number of advisors that weren't saying anything. I was just like, wow, like that's not. And then I also saw that your story and your message isn't just your story and your message. It's actually your leadership. And then I start seeing the advisors that are saying something, but they're saying the exact same thing everyone else is. And they're talking about COVID-19. And I was just like, wow, there's an opportunity for advisors to share a very different message and a very different story right now that really has them show up as leaders and seen as leaders and really differentiate themselves and separate themselves from the pack at a time where that's more important than ever. And that's when I called you. I was like, Brad, we've got to help advisors. Like we've got to get these advisors like in motion. And I know they want to be, but a lot of them are just, I don't know what to say. So I either am not saying anything or I'm saying the same thing everyone else is. And you're like, man, I'm getting the same thing. But you were hearing more from like, how do we do this virtually? And how do we, so those kind of two worlds came together of like, well, let's combine that. Let's teach them what to say and how to say it right now. And let's teach them how to do it virtually because there's a bigger platform with more people paying attention than there ever has been.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being a catalyst to the Virtual Advisor Facebook group, kicking that thing off. So by the way, if you're out there watching, listening, wherever you may be, if you're on Facebook, number one, start a watch party, share this. Because I can promise if you've got some colleagues out there, they're going to want to hear this as well. And then secondarily, this is live. So my team is actually out there in the chat. Team, if you can, maybe throw a comment, throw a chat out there and say, hey, here I am. And they'll be actually looking at the questions coming in on the chat. So if you have them, feed them in the chat. My team will feed them to me. I'll feed them to Chris. and hopefully we don't mess it up along that chain. So anyway, so Chris, let's go into, actually we were talking right before we went live, and you said, hey, this is one of the things that's just like blowing me away right now, surprising me, back to that just not communicating at all. And earlier I went live with David Bach, and his sister runs a $1.1 billion asset management firm. And guess what? Number one thing on her list to do's every single morning, 10 client phone calls at a minimum. So why don't you share what you're seeing and maybe a huge opportunity, and then maybe we translate that into a story framework and how to connect.
Yeah, it's been interesting. We've brought on a number of clients since the pandemic happened. And some of them we've talked to and they haven't become clients, but regardless, in every conversation I ask them, so like, what are you doing right now? 80% of them, it's something like this. I'm looking at an agency to like rebrand me and do a new logo for a personal brand. I'm buying my podcasting equipment. I bought a course on podcasting. I'm looking at the best webinar platforms, and I'm like studying how to do Facebook ads. Like, that's amazing. Like, and I really acknowledge them for being proactive because I think that's important and that's the future. And then I always say, okay, but what about like how many calls are you making a day to your existing prospects? People you've already worked to, like, you've already done the hard work to get them as like someone that's interested. And they're like, shockingly, a lot of times, like, not a lot. How many phone calls are you making a day to your existing clients, the people that already love you and are loyal to you and like are the reason you're in business? Not a lot. How many of you are making daily phone calls to your centers of influence or prospective centers of influence, like people you'd love to solidify a relationship? And it's just like this idea of stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. And I'm not saying you have to do either or. I do think it's an and. But leadership right now, in my opinion, is starting first and foremost with the people you already have relationships with. Your family, your clients, your team, your family, your team, your clients, your community, right? And you can be doing both, but it's just, you know, like, my mind didn't, when this whole thing happened, Brad, my mind didn't naturally go to a bunch of new and like mass marketing and online marketing and Facebook ads, partly because there's just not a lot of, I haven't done a lot of that. I'm gearing up for that. So I'm doing both. My mind naturally went to like, how do I take this training, how to share a message in times of uncertainty, and get in front of as many of my existing relationships as I have now to add value to them. And we've done really, really well, like, since the pandemic. And so it's just like, man, if you're not taking, and so there's one thing, but here's the thing I would say, Brad, is like, the distinction we're making with our clients is don't be reaching out just for the sake of reaching out. Like, reach out with the purpose of connecting. Like, if there was ever a time where you've been granted the opportunity to be vulnerable and like go somewhere that you've never gone before, like in your conversations, it's now. You have an opportunity to really reach out. And look, it doesn't have to be simple. A simple framework could be that when you reach out to a prospective client, an existing client, or a center of influence or prospective center of influence, it's like, hey, the only intention I have for reaching out to you today is just to check on you and your family and like see how this has affected you. And then you listen to what they're saying, you listen for what they're not saying, and you have the courage to like dig deeper and ask additional questions and like really get somewhere with them. But that's just been like kind of amazing to me.
Yeah. So let's go back to the framework, because I think that's really key. And by the way, for those of you watching live, Chris is literally a member of the Virtual Advisor Facebook group. So number one, you're getting like the tip of the iceberg right now. We actually did a live case study the other day with one of the group members on this exact framework around his own personal story. So let's go to number one, reaching out to connect. But what's the next step past just, hey, Chris, how you doing? And kind of the communication strategy that you've helped a number of your clients with.
Yeah. And if I can say, like, if you're an advisor watching this, you want to be in the Virtual Advisor Facebook group. Like, the amount of content that Brad's putting out there and the free training and the resources, it's like, I've never seen anything like it in the industry. So it's amazing. Yeah. So that purpose of reaching out to connect, we don't want it to be viewed as like a one-time thing. It's like, kind of like, we don't want it to be like, oh, check, you know, I reached out to that client. I reached out to that prospective client. Use that as a way to kick off this momentum of like doing something really intentional over the next 60 to 90 days. And that's how I would really encourage you to think about your marketing right now and your messaging and your story you're putting out. Think about it in like 30-day chunks. Like, and maybe think about 3 30-day chunks that add up to 90 days, because beyond that, who knows, right? And so one of the things that we're encouraging our clients to do is like kick something off that where you could send out a weekly communication or a bi-weekly or, whatever your kind of style is, but something that allows you to stay present in front of your clients over the next 60 to 90 days, but not where you're asking them for business, not where you're reaching out and talking about COVID-19 or like talking about the markets. That can be a small piece of it, but it's like, we had a client that kicked off the resiliency series, and they're going to be sending out a communication every week over the next, 90 days about resiliency and sharing their own story of resiliency and sharing some of their client stories of resiliency. And so the purpose of this, like reaching out to connect, you don't want it to be just a one-time thing. It's like reach out to them, make those phone calls to connect, and then re-emphasize it through email communication and like mailing your list. And if I could encourage you to like have one of those email communications go out, be a video. Like, and I know there's a lot of advisors that are nervous about getting on video. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be done with your, with your iPhone, your smartphone, but just think about like, how do I stand out over the next 60 to 90 days? And we're hearing from advisors every single week that like, yeah, winning business every week because people aren't reaching out to their clients. And I am, and they're talking to my client and then making an introduction.
Yeah. Imagine when you reach out to connect and you're not even their advisor, and their advisor that manages all their assets hasn't done one thing. They haven't heard from them. I mean, think about the power of that. And I'm seeing the same thing, Chris. We talked about it this morning with David. I've talked about it the last 3 to 4 weeks with our offices that have taken a proactive approach and not just sat back and let the world happen to them. And I've seen it twice in my career. I saw it in 08, 09. Proactive advisors that are willing to do the simple, yet not easy. I know we were just talking about this before we went live. Everybody knows how to get in shape. Go to the gym and eat less calories and burn more calories, right? But most people aren't willing to put in the work. That's kind of the world we're in right now, is pick up the phone, put in the dials, and connect. It's not easy. I'm not saying it is, but it is simple. And if you do it, it will lead to business over and over and over. I've just seen example after example after example the last 3-4 weeks, our offices that have. Do you have any thoughts on that? Anything else? Accountability measures, if you're an advisor out there, to make sure you're actually doing it?
Yeah, I mean, like we've done some call challenges in our virtual advisor Facebook group where, right, like 10 calls a day or 20 calls a day. But the other thing I would just have you step back and think about as an advisor is, like, in my opinion, it's times like this is why you became an advisor. Whether you know it or not, or whether you've ever had that conscious thought, but like, I don't want to say easy, but it's easier to be an advisor and be all in and be excited about it when there's like the market's on a tear for 12 years in a row and things are good. And like, but it's like, but who are you going to be and what type of advisor are you and how are you going to show up when times like this? So it's like, I actually believe that times like this is why you're an advisor.
Yeah.
Like times like this is why your job matters so much and where you make the biggest difference. And just look at the current message you're putting out or you're not putting out and ask yourself, is that like how I want to model my leadership?
So,
and if it is, great.
Well, Philip Stutz, who's one of the early guys on the Virtual Advisor series, he asked himself a question that I thought was very powerful, that if I'm an advisor, right down the path that you're talking about, Chris, how do I want to be remembered a year from now?
Yeah.
After this is all blown over, was I the guy that stood up, or the gal that stood up and served, and I was the voice of reason in the chaos? I was the light in the dark room? Or do I want to be the status quo, how everybody else showed up?
Yeah. One of the things we asked our kids the other day on the hike is, like, when we get through this as a Smith family, because we will, are we going to look back at this and say, like, oh man, I'm so glad we got through that. So glad we survived that. Or are we going to look back and be like, look at what we created. Look at how we showed up. Like, look at how we led. Look at what came out of this. Because I believe that businesses, brands, individuals have an opportunity to solidify like their brand forever and relationships forever, or really harm it based out of a time like this.
People remember how you showed up during the tough times, not the easy ones. That's for sure. Well, and to that point, to the math and the study behind it, I know we have a mutual friend, John Bowen, that runs CEG. So very high-end mastermind group with financial advisors. We were talking the other day. He showed me a study the last time this happened, 08, 09. They actually did a study on wealth managers, reactive versus proactive. And the reactive ones were actually down 20 or 30% a year or two following. The proactive ones, I think they'd grown their business by 40 or 50% coming out of the bottom of that.
Yeah.
Point. So,
and if I can speak to that, Brad, like to put that into context, I just want to share my opinion on that, because I think some advisors might hear proactive and reactive. They might just think about that like planning. No, like, look, planning should be a given. Meaning, like, unless you're just asleep as an advisor, you're probably like, with the way trading is done now and the way planning is done, the way the markets move and technology, it'd probably be pretty like difficult that you're not being somewhat proactive.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that, like, when we're talking about being proactive versus reactive, planning is just like one piece of it. I think the way bigger side of being proactive is, again, how are you showing up? It has nothing to do with the markets. It has nothing to do with your planning. It has nothing to do with your strategies. Like the biggest sign of proactive that I think has advisors win and come like really grow out of this is more of the intangibles of like just who was I as a person, and how did I show up, and how deeply did I connect, and did I take connections that are already deep and deepen them? Did I form new ones? What kind of message and story was I putting out? Was I putting out a story of like hope and inspiration and overcoming and like what's possible for our future? Or was I just talking about the markets and COVID-19 all the time? Because that's not leadership. That's just more noise.
Yeah.
And so I think there's really two messages right now as advisors that we have a responsibility to share. And one is a message of hope and overcoming, and reminding our clients that, like, hey, we're going to get through this and overcome this because we've overcome difficult things in the past. So have you. So have I. And I do think that, Brad, like, you know, our clients can only hear so many stories of hope and overcoming before they're like, okay, got it. Like, awesome. I also believe we have a responsibility right now to be helping our clients be excited about the future and about what's possible, and asking them like, hey, what's your dream? Like, what vacation do you guys have planned for later this year? And if a family's like, oh, we've put everything on hold. It's like, no. Like, if you can't end up going on it, you can't end up going on it. But like, we still need to like dream and plan for the future and plan for hope and possibility and what's to come. Like, my wife and I have booked like 2 or 3 vacations. Why? Airlines are dirt cheap. Airbnbs are ridiculously inexpensive. Now, there's probably a 99% chance that every trip we book, Brad, won't happen, and we'll get 100% refund. But do you know what that's done for the morale of our family and having something to look forward to? And like you have that opportunity to make that kind of impact as an advisor to your clients right now. Because look, if we're not, our clients are sitting around looking at the past and beating themselves up over what they should have done to be more prepared. They're terrified of the future, of how like everything's going to like come crashing down, and they're paralyzed in the present. But if we as advisors show up and lead and say like, no, like, don't look at the past for all the reasons why you should have done something differently. Look at the stories of your life of how you've overcome and the hard things you've been through. You know, you might share yours too, and help your clients remember who they are. It's like, oh yeah, we're overcomers. Like, we'll get through this. And then have your clients be looking to the future of like what they're excited about, and like their retirement date, or like their trip they're going to go on with their family, or like, and then in the present, there's like an ability to like actually still live and be here, and not just, you know, surrounded by like fear and uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a perfect segue. Let's go into a little bit of the case study we did with Dave. So Dave's a client of mine, good friend of mine. He's in the Virtual Advisor Facebook group. So once again, I mean, here's what I love is, Chris, you're practicing what you preach, man. You're like, hey, I realize there's a need. I'm just going to show up and serve and add value, and we'll figure out the rest long-term. So once again, as an advisor, if you're out there and you're not sure what to do, just show up and serve others. The rest will take care of itself. But one of the things you mentioned is like, hey, I'd love to hop in this Facebook group and I'll just be a part of the conversation and add value where I can. So we actually, was it last weekend? We did a case study with Dave out of Washington, and he did an awesome job, kind of version 1.0 of how he would reach out and connect during a time like this. But Dave has an incredible story. He's a cancer survivor, and just an amazing story of overcoming, to your point. Let's talk about Dave's first version of that. Was kind of more of what I would say like the narrator to a story, you know, like kind of like the 30,000 foot view looking down upon Dave. And what I saw you kind of workshop with him live was awesome. It was like, Dave, that's really good, and that's better than 99% of advisors out there. But what if we actually brought them through your eyes as you experienced it, what you felt? And can you share a little bit of that framework? Because that was such an amazing like transformation of a great story, but you made it like an incredible firsthand account, and how that can connect with the audience once you craft it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So the story that we've been helping our clients craft right now in real time, and using it as the foundation for that first, what we're calling connection piece. So we're actually calling the first message that they send out the connection piece. Is it's really a simple little formula, and you can do it right now. And encourage you, if you're watching this live, to actually do this. Like, I'm going to give you some time. The first thing we have you do is we have you identify a time in your life where you faced a challenge that was of a magnitude that you really didn't think you could overcome it, or you were really unsure about your ability to overcome it. So it wasn't just like, oh yeah, I'm having a bad day. It was like, no, like, I don't know if I can get through this. And I've never met someone, Brad, that doesn't have one of those, right? Whether it's personally or professionally. So do that right now if you're watching. Identify a time. You might have several of them, but pick one. Then go back and revisit the feelings and the emotions that you felt in that time. Because sometimes you get so far separated from it, you kind of forget that, like, wow, like, if I go back to that place, I felt hopeless. I felt completely lost. Like, I felt completely uncertain. And the reason that's so important to go back and revisit the feelings and the emotions is because whatever you felt is more than likely what your clients are feeling today. So if you have the courage to share that story with them and how you felt, they'll be like, that's how I feel now. So 1, what was a story that you didn't think you could overcome? 2, how did it feel? 3, what did you do to overcome it? What I found, Brad, is that almost every story I've ever heard of overcoming something that we didn't think we could overcome, it involves other people. It involves a team or someone that loved us or cared about us enough to, like, have a hard conversation with us or inspire us or, care for us or whatever it was. And then the 4th thing, what did you realize about yourself? Like, when you overcame that thing you didn't think you could overcome, what did you realize? And clients will say things like, wow, like, now that you're asking me, I realized that I can get through anything. I realized how strong I am. I realized how powerful I am. Like, they really acknowledge themselves for that experience, right? And then once we take them through that, I go, yeah, you have your first story to send out to your list. Like, that's an amazing, powerful story to share in the form of a video or an email or just on these calls you're making. Now, here's the nuance though, Brad. You can tell a story like that about you and make it all about you. You can also tell a story like that about you and make it about them. And that, to me, is like one of the mastery pieces of story. And I've done both. Mm-hmm. The way that you make a story about you is if you try to, like, do too much with it and you try to, like, make yourself look good in it, you try to, like, turn it into a performance and people can't connect with it. Or if you're like, hey, I'm telling you the story not to actually make it about me. I'm just telling you the story in the hopes that, like, there's something in here that will inspire you and that could serve you and that might make a difference for you. So it's like you're telling your story, but it's not about you. It's about what's possible for them. Mm-hmm. And then the only call to action in an email like that, or the only call to action in a phone call like that, is like, if there's anything we can do to lighten the load right now in you and your family, anything at all, like, please call us and let us know. Like, we'll do anything we can. Like, because some advisors want to send out, like, a connection piece like that, and at the end start talking about the markets and, like, let's do a review on your assets. It's like, like, your clients are going to call you for that, or you might already called them for that, or there'll be time for that. It's like, but there's also a time for just connection. Like, yeah. And I know that's so hard to think about, with no other call to action, no other purpose other than to connect and just say, we're just concerned about you and your family. Just want you to know, like, we're here and here's what we know. You're going to get through this. Just like we've gotten through, just like you've overcome things in the past, just like I overcame in that story I just shared with you, you're going to get through this. So that's a little formula, the 4 parts, that's really been helpful. And it just makes it simple. Because I think a lot of advisors are like, okay, I know I should reach out, but I don't know what story to share. I don't know. It's like, well, this is a really simple formula you could use.
Yeah. And I think that's a little bit of the paralysis. I grew a business by cold calling. So if there's anybody that knows about call reluctance, it's me, because, it's easy to check emails, and then before you know it, it's noon and half the day is gone. So one of my hacks back in the day, it was like, make 15 phone calls before 8:15, and granted, I wasn't getting a lot of answers. People weren't, like, trying to pick up the phone and chat, but I think whatever you got to do to get that momentum going for the day is really key. But the second thing is, you don't have to overcomplicate these phone calls. Literally, your opening script could be, hey, Chris, it's Brad. I was thinking of you this morning. How are you and your family getting along? You guys hanging in there? And listen, we've seen these phone calls going 20 to 30 minutes because people are dying right now for human connection. They're feeling alone and isolated. And so there's never been an easier phone call to make, as far as just like, you really don't have to say much at all. You just have to listen and be empathetic. And those are turning into real business, because existing clients are saying, hey, you know what? Thanks for reaching out. I do have that CD over at the bank for $200,000 that I'm getting nothing on because of where interest rates are. Can I have you guys look at some options on that for me? Or right now, this is the scary time that our world's in. I think it's over 20 million Americans are now unemployed. So we had one of our offices on the East Coast literally brought on this client within a month before this thing hit. Check-in phone call just like that, lost his job. So number one, the advisors, they're listening, showing empathy. But now the 401k that was not available before because he was working, it's like, you know what? I need to have you guys look at that $500,000 401k, incorporate it into my plan. So that's the thing right now. I'm just seeing it work, and it's all about empathy. It's not, you don't have to overcomplicate this. It just pick up the phone and connect with the human being, and it's just working. So, all right, Chris, let's keep rolling here. Any other thoughts just on frameworks? You did share an awesome email, one of your clients did, and they had a really simple call to action, like the candle company. Do you mind sharing their call to action? Because I thought that was just amazing, and it had nothing to do with scheduling a consultation or anything like that. It was all about being human.
Yeah, they're an amazing company. Steve and Katesha Weaver, they're in a mastermind that Brad and I belong to, and they have a company called the Candle Lab. And they were hit hard retail, couldn't do business anymore. And so they sent this really beautiful email out to their customer base. And really the whole email was like, we want to thank you for your 13 loyal years of service. Like, we want to check in with you and your family and see how you're doing. And then at the end, they said, and if there's anything we can do to like lighten your load or like help you adjust and settle in a smoothest way as possible, please hit reply and let us know. We're going to read every email. No, like, hey, no mention of like, oh, and by the way, we're still selling candles online. We still have an e-commerce. None of that. And what was crazy is within one day, they had the largest e-commerce online sales in the history of their company. And they never asked for a site. Like, they didn't even hint towards that. And then they got these email responses, Brad, from customers saying like, this is the best COVID-19 email I've gotten. This is a refreshing breath of fresh air. I'm going to go buy candles just as a way to say, I don't even need candles. I'm going to go buy candles just for being a cool company and like sending out a communication like this. So it's just, the other thing I would say though, Brad, is like, I've learned that for me, kind of going back to this idea of getting out, making those calls and like staying in front of your clients. I really believe that as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, really anyone, but especially as an entrepreneur and business owner, momentum is everything. And when you lose momentum, it can really like start to weigh on you like mentally, and you get in a funk and you just don't feel like you're making a difference. And my point and where I'm going with all this is like, I think a lot of times we confuse being busy with momentum. So if you're an advisor right now that's like screaming out the gates at like, I'm going to get my podcast up and running. I'm going to do my personal brand. I'm going to get on webinar platforms. I'm going to write these ads and write all this copy. And you're kind of neglecting like real conversations with real clients and centers of influence, prospective clients. For a bit of a time, all of that work behind the scenes feels like momentum, but you're really just busy. And I'm not saying you're not making progress. And I'm saying from personal experience that if I get out of the momentum of like serving people and I get into busy work, I don't even know it, because in the beginning it feels like momentum. And then about 5 or 6 or 7 days in, it's like, I start feeling this funk and I've completely lost momentum. And I recognize about myself. So that's why too, Brad, going into this 5 weeks ago, part of my commitment was to get on and do as many free trainings as I could and just be in front of people, as I knew it would keep me in momentum and it would keep my energy high, while still, looking at ads and building out some of our own copy and things like that. But just make sure that you're paying attention right now is like also as an advisor, like staying in momentum. And I don't know anything that keeps you in momentum as much as like reaching out and talking to real people and serving them.
Here's the thing. We're all human beings, whether you're a financial advisor, whether you're running the Campfire Effect and your name's Chris Smith, whether you're Brad, we're all human beings. And one of the things I've seen the power of it, to your point, Chris, is when you do reach out and connect. Hey, I'm working from a spare bedroom right now. I'm feeling a little isolated too, just like the rest of you. And one of the things that fires me up, I had a great conversation with Beth, one of my favorite advisors out of Pennsylvania today. Had another conversation with Steven out of LA today. And it fired me up just because I could see them connecting the dots. And that motivated me and reminded me of, hey, I'm adding value to people that I care about. So the same thing for you as a financial advisor. If you're over here just webinar, Facebook ads, all that, you're actually, you're missing out on a great opportunity for your own self-care, which is connecting with the people that like and trust you and that you can serve at the highest possible level right now. And it will fire you up. And speaking of momentum, it will get that going for you. So what should we do? Let's do, for those of you out there, join the Virtual Advisor Facebook group. If you want an accountability group, we'll fire it up. I've got a cool app. It'll hold you accountable, whoever wants in. We'll do a 10, 20 dials a day challenge. I know my buddy JP down in Texas needs it because he's already asked me to start one. So
be awesome.
Join the group. We'll be your accountability group. It's all good. We'll help.
Yeah.
Chris, what else you got, buddy? What else you got that can help advisors out there right now?
Yeah. What's interesting is, I say this with a bit of a word of caution in the sense of what I'm about to say isn't like, this is possible for every single person that ever works with us. And, and the reason this is so present for me, what I'm about to share, Brad, is, I'm putting together a webinar that we're going to start running some ads to next week. And several of the case studies that we feature in the webinar are advisors who in one way, shape, or another, we help them grow their business. Whether that was we dramatically increased assets under management, or we dramatically increased the conversion rates of their seminars, or something where we had a profound impact. And the thing that I stress in the webinar is what we did to help an advisor double his business, or what we did to help an advisor land the 2 largest clients in the history of her firm in the same month. And she's already an elite advisor, or what we did to help an advisor who'd already done 300 seminars successfully take his conversion rates to a whole new level. It was so simple that it's almost unbelievable. Advisors always come to me that I experienced, Brad, they're always coming to me looking for this really crazy solution, this really big thing. We never do that. These outstanding, kind of unbelievable results we get for people is usually just by making a few simple tweaks. I'm a big fan of don't stop doing anything you're doing. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. Let's just make a few tweaks. And so the thing I would share is one of the biggest tweaks that we made that's interesting, whether it was the person that brought in their 2 biggest clients in the history of the firm a month, or the person that doubled their assets under management, or the conversion rates, it was the same thing. And that was, we asked them a question that helped them go from being an inch deep and a mile wide, which a lot of advisors face that. It's we're serving too many clients and we kind of know it. We don't have a real niche or a specialty or a focus. There's no real cohesiveness in our message. They know that, but it's hard to get away from it, because it's well, can the business sustain itself if we start going from an inch deep and a mile wide to an inch wide and a mile deep? And we start by asking them a question that's pretty confronting. And it's just look, what do you want to be known for? And I get that that's not your casual dinner time conversation. Hey, Brad, what do you want to be known for? It's a pretty big confronting question, and it's meant to be that. But what's so interesting, Brad, is most of these advisors, those 3 advisors that I just talked about that we're featuring in the case study, that when they came to us, they were spending a lot of money on agencies and advertising and marketing and seminars and direct mail pieces, and wondering why it wasn't having the impact that it could have. And the thing I always say is that they were putting the medium before the message. So they were throwing lots of money at mediums, right? Mm-hmm. But not really clear on the message and who it was for. And this might sound overly simplified, but every time what we do is we go okay, well, let's hold off on the medium for a minute. I don't even want to hear about your medium. I don't care about what you're doing in marketing or branding, or I just want to get you really clear on what your actual message is. Mm-hmm. The thing you feel most called to say, the thing that you want to be known for, and to who. So I want to find the most aligned message that you feel called to share and deliver it to the most aligned group of people that you feel most called to serve. And if we do that, all of this stuff works. And some of it even goes away. So that's that thing of and the reason I point that out right now, Brad, is I believe that differentiation and specialization matters now more than ever. Look, when markets are going great, I hate to say this because I actually would I know this is true, but I wish it wasn't. But meaning when markets are great, you can kind of be not all that differentiated, not all that specialized. And if you work hard, you're probably going to do okay. Mm-hmm. But when there's uncertainty and things aren't just like humming along in the market and the economy, differentiation and specialization now matters more than ever. And so if I'm an advisor right now, the question I'd be asking myself is like, now is an amazing time to really step back and think about, what do I want to be known for as an advisor? Like, what do I want our brand to stand for? And who is it that I feel most called to serve as a group of people more than anyone? And then once I have that clarity, how do I redesign all of my marketing, all of my messaging, my seminars, my talks? Like, I go all in on that. And that's really how simple it can be.
So I want to give a shout out. I've got Jerry, one of our clients that's, I see he's thrown a comment or two here. Hey, I'm a farm boy. You're a farm boy. I mean, you still team rope, which you've taken it kind of next level. I left the farm stuff behind for the most part, other than the 6 chickens we bought once this whole thing started. So we got that.
That's awesome.
But I know you're also a chicken farmer, a fellow chicken farmer. So we
love it.
We can get into that later. But so Jerry's one of our clients, humble beginnings, hardworking, grew up on a dairy farm. Obviously, it's kind of the backbone, the core work ethic that he grew up. And you know, I can obviously relate to that. I'm sure you can relate to some of that. If you were going to, not knowing Jerry, but just kind of knowing that's his origin story, you know, treat others as you want to be treated. It's all about the work that you put in or the results you're going to get. I'm putting you on the spot here, Chris, but if you were going to talk about kind of an origin story for a firm that kind of translates into that, some of that messaging, what might be some tips you'd give Jerry that's watching in here?
Well, I can give Jerry some really relevant tips because we just started working with a new private client that is the exact same scenario. Grew up really blue collar, grew up on a farm, grew up in a small community, loves those type of people, and yet didn't really take any of that into account when he was building out his brand, his story, his message. Went and started working with an agency, started focusing on the mediums, and ends up with this brand that is like, speaks more to like corporate executives in New York City and Chicago than it does. And he's like, I don't even like those people, much less like, not only are they not the best fit for us, I don't even like working with them. But he literally had a brand and a message that couldn't attract the people that he even felt most called to serve. Mm. And so we reconnected him back to this idea of roots and community and redesigned what he wants to be known for around that. We redesigned the thing he wants to stand for around that. We got really clear on who his ideal client is, and rebuilt all of his positioning, messaging around that. And so it's like, Jerry, like, dude, like fully embrace who you come from and fully embrace your roots, because the thing is like, people will want to hire Jerry as an advisor more because they knew he grew up on a dairy farm and he has a hard work ethic than they will about like his planning methodology and how he allocates assets. Yeah. And the more advisors can just wrap their mind around it, like Casey Weed, great example. Casey and I had a phone call earlier today. Some of you might know about Casey, really successful advisor. He's one of the case studies I'm talking about. I showed Casey our framework for the first time, the signature framework on how to go give a seminar. Very different than he'd ever presented a seminar. Very first thing he says to me, Brad, is like, Chris, this looks cool. And I teach about 60% less about the markets than I teach now. And our seminars are working. So I'm not in a rush to fix what's not broken. And I go, okay, well, you have it. Well, 2 weeks later, he realizes, I don't know that I even love giving the seminar presentation that much anyways that I've been given for 10 years. So I might as well like try Chris's. Teaches 60% less about the markets than he's ever taught, connects 60% more, schedule. So my point being is like those people are going to buy you anyways, Jerry. Like they're buying you, not the name, like not your firm, but it's like, but have you authentically like positioned yourself with your message and your origin story around that and show people like, look, we have everything to serve you at the highest levels and do comprehensive wealth management with like blue collar work ethic and like values, and like, we still know you by name. Mm-hmm. But it's like, we try to be something we're not. And I get that this industry is really, really guilty of making people feel like, oh, you should be this way, or you're supposed to look this way, or you're supposed to say these types of things. And it's like, man, if more people just reconnect back to their authentic roots and get really clear on what, like Jerry, like, man, what do I want to be known for? I want to be known for helping like blue collar families like mine have access to like, you know, things that normally like only wealthy people have. We could go so many places with that. And it's like, and then what's interesting is this guy that I was telling you about recently, this private client, because he thought that to his market was when he built this high-end brand, he was spending a lot of time like around watering holes, we call it, marketing to attract people he didn't even want to work with. It's just kind of funny, like how many times we see that happen. And so, yeah, like your growth as an advisor is absolutely connected to your roots and where you've come from. The more you honor that, the more you honor the past and have that be part of like what you stand for and what you want to be known for and who you want to serve. It's just that's where it just becomes effortless. And like everything's aligned, like what you want to be known for, who you serve, how you serve them, the message you put in front of them, your planning process. It's just all aligned, and it just starts to feel effortless. And it requires some faith though, Brad, because what Jerry would have to do in that case is Jerry would have to make a decision, or he would get to make a decision of like, well, if this is what I really want to be known for, and these are the people I really want to work with, then the decision is, do I have the faith and the courage to go all in?
Yeah. It's what's so interesting about these conversations, Chris, it's not rocket science. It's actually just stepping back, and it's like, what do I actually want? It's Covey's 7 habits. Start with the end in mind, and work backwards, right? And
Wild.
It's funny, like how my podcast came to be, how the virtual advisor series came to be that we're doing right now. It was like, hey, I see a need in the marketplace. I enjoy nerding out and having fun conversations where I learn from people that I respect and admire. And I'm like, I bet there's a lot of other advisors out there that this could serve them. But here's the one thing, once you get clear on that filter, I know who makes a great guest on this and who doesn't. So back to your point, once you get really clear on that filter, here's who I want to serve at the highest level. Now it's really easy. Here's who I should invite into the party. Here's who I shouldn't. And it's like this freeing thing.
But Brad, like that's the thing is like most of us, I didn't realize this for like most of my life. The thing I was missing though was the lens. The filter. I had never taken the time to get clear on what aligned with me. So therefore, how would I know? Oh, I didn't. So I would just take on everything. Everything was, but intuitively I would feel at times like, I don't particularly enjoy working with this client, but like when you have a clear lens to look through and it's like, oh my gosh, it still takes some faith and some courage to say yes or no, but at least you know that like, and that's the other thing, Brad, is I realized that my message never had anything to hold it accountable. Without that clarity and without that filter, my message, literally I could wake up every day and change the message and it would be fine. And I could change my target market because there's nothing to hold it accountable to. It's no different than this woman who I'm talking about who brought in her 2 largest clients in the history of her firm. And she's in the Bay Area, really successful advisor, works with really affluent people. And we just gave her permission to start sharing her origin story of growing up in China and the 7.2 magnitude earthquake, like causing her family to be homeless. And then an overthrow in the regime of China, and her dad was in the military and they were homeless again. And she scraped and did everything she could to come to this country. Like literally and she was like, when she came to us, she's like, hey, I've got a branding agency trying to pitch me this. I've got this. And I was like, let's just get you out telling your authentic story to the people you really want to serve. And she finally said out loud, almost like in our group workshop, Brad, she almost like was like looking around like, is this okay to say? She's like, I really want to just serve women. I just really want to serve female executives. I'm like, why are you, don't apologize for that. If that's who you feel called to serve, go all in, like serve them and declare it. And she's like, really? I'm like, yes, really. So guess what? Not only did she bring in the 2 largest clients in the history of her firm in a month, 2 female executives that are her dream clients. It's like the minute you also take a stand for what you want to be known for, and you take a stand for your most authentic story, well, guess who starts showing up in your world? The people that are most attracted to your most authentic message, which means that those are going to be your dream clients. It's like, how could you ever find your dream clients if you're not putting out your actual story? Like, if people don't know who you are, how are they going to? So it's so funny to me whenever I have an advisor that's like, man, I want to find more of my dream client, but I don't want to tell them anything about me. It's like, I don't know. That'd be like saying, like, I want to go out and find the partner of my dreams, like a wife, but I don't want her to know anything about me.
That is so true. I've heard that. Well, and part of it is the vulnerability that it requires, right?
Yeah.
And I relate to that. It's not easy to go out and kind of
totally
open up, but it is so funny. It's like the one thing they need to do to basically free them up and be able to do that. Many advisors are scared to do it.
Can I say one more?
Yeah. Hop in.
Something that really helped me with that same thing, Brad, around my reluctance, like, I don't know if I want to share my story and it's kind of vulnerable. And it's like, do people even care? And when I realized that, like, wait, like that whole thing of my story isn't about me. Because if my story's about me, then man, I'm really reluctant to tell it because I might look bad, or I might not be accepted, or I might be too. But if I can just let go of that and realize, no, my story is just meant to serve other people. And that's what really happened with this particular woman, is she was like, man, I'm now realizing if I were to share this story, there's probably a lot of women it could inspire to go after their dreams. I'm like, yeah, it could. And when that switched for her, it was like, I can't not share this story. But do you see how if it's like about her, yeah, it's like, why would I share it? But if it's not about me and it's about all the women it could inspire, and my story just shows what's possible, it's like, I can't not share this.
Yeah. And I think there's a really a cool distinction you made there that is important about a good story that draws people in. It's not, do you remember, maybe I was the only small town kid that was watching this, Married with Children, Al Bundy. You remember him?
My older brother loved that show. He'd always get in trouble. He'd always get in trouble for watching it in our house.
Yeah, I think I got in trouble too. I was probably too young to be watching it. I don't even think you could air that on TV these days. But no. The story of I scored 4 touchdowns in my senior year at Polk High, or whatever story he always told, that is not the story that pulls people in. The brag, the humble brag. The story that Chris is talking about here is the overcoming story. Because I mean, to the example of who isn't going to resonate with this lady that was born in another country, lost her home to an earthquake, came over here probably penniless, living on humble means, and here's what she built and created. And guess what? I'm a female, I'm an executive. Those are the people I resonate. I'm here to serve you as well. I mean, no wonder she's
and Brad,
on left and
what's
right.
crazy, she and I had a call this week, and she's engaging with us to go even deeper, because she's like, now that she's woke up to this a little bit, and this is what happens with people, they start to wake up to like, whoa, like I started putting my story out there in the world, and I saw the impact it had, and I saw how it felt. She's like, Chris, I think I even want to go more specific and deeper. It's not just female executives. It's female executives who are first generation immigrants like I was. And I'm like, let's go. Like, cause she's just like, that's who, but again, what's going to immediately come up for her, like most advisors, is scarcity. And I get it. I've had it too. Like the minute you get like clear on the calling, it's like, but hold on. Is there going to be enough of those? Will I run out of opportunity? Can I really do that? You know what I mean? Like you got to confront that scarcity. But if you can take a stronger stand for the calling than the scarcity wants to talk you out of it. I've never had a client, Brad, that's gone all in from a place of alignment and calling that hasn't figured it out and like been wildly successful. I've also never had a client that's tried to just stay wide and serve everyone with everything that's been nearly as impactful as they could. They can still be successful, but not as fulfilled and not as like on purpose. And so,
well, and last plug, I promise, for the Virtual Advisor Facebook group. But here's the deal. When you have a story like that you just shared, and when we're in a world now, COVID-19, everybody is now running a virtual business, at least for the foreseeable future. When she tells that story, it doesn't just resonate in the Bay Area. Guess who it resonates for? Every single first generation female executive in the United States of America that she can work with.
Totally. So
now she becomes not the local advisor. She becomes the best advisor for that target market that she wants to serve at the highest level.
And if I'm that market, if I'm a first generation female executive that's an immigrant to this country, do I want to work with like an advisor that just will, kind of works with anyone, or like I'm as called to that message as she is. But that's what I'm saying. It's almost like when you let the calling out, it creates this beacon out there in the world. And just as crazy as it might sound, people they feel attracted to it. They're like, man, I want to. Okay, Brad, I know we're out of time.
All right,
Sorry.
buddy. Yes. So you have a Rockstar Live right after this. So by the way, if you want to just hop off my live and go straight to Chris's, you want to tease the conversation you're about to have?
Yeah. So my wife and I are doing something that we feel really called to do. And that's something that we've been talking about for years. And that is we took our family through the Campfire Effect. So the exact same process we're talking about for entrepreneurs and advisors we did with our family. And we created what we call our family brand, which just defines what we stand for as a family, what we want to be known for. And so we've launched a connection series similar to the virtual advisor series. And we're going live in 9 minutes with Layla Ali, Muhammad Ali's daughter, and talking about all the amazing change she's created in her life. And so go to Family Brand, like our Facebook page, and you can learn more about the Connection Series. And seriously, I hope you guys join the Virtual Advisor Facebook group. I'm in there on a weekly basis. We'd love to serve you and help you with anything we can. And just thank you, Brad, for being a leader in the industry and setting the example.
Chris, dude, every conversation we have, love it more. So thanks for joining. Thanks for adding a ton of value.
Okay.
See you
guys.
Bye.